afternoon, everyone. So, Vani, thank you for that extremely kind introduction. So, Vani and I go back quite a, quite a few years to when she was going to start, she started a company in Silicon Valley. And she just decided that she wanted to start a company. Then she picked an area to start a company in. I don't think Vani herself had much knowledge of that particular area, but she just said, as a business person, what is this? An important lesson. Here is an area where there's an opportunity. I am going to build a company in that area. And with just sheer tenacity, she did that very, very successfully. So I've always admired that, that gumption thing. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to have the tenacity to stick with it and make it happen. So it's great to see you, Vani, in this avatar. So I want to say I'm really happy to be here. A double delight. One is to be here with Vani. Two is to be here with Rashesh. So Rashesh and I have actually known each other also for a long time. And, I've seen Rashesh when he was first starting out Edelweiss. He was in a very small office, which may be about the size of the stage, somewhere off the Oval, I remember, right? In the Flora Fountain Oval area. I don't remember the precise place. And then, somehow I was drawn to him, and I don't even know the reasons why I was meeting him, but I met him over several years. There must have been some good reason. And then I next saw him in the Express Towers. And then most recently, even 2 years back, I saw him in his gleaming new offices in Kalinas. And this is the kind of thing that makes you feel very good when you see, someone like Rashesh who decides to do something new. He builds it, and when you see his success, but most importantly, when you see that with that success, he remains unchanged. He's the same Rashesh. That, I think, more than anything else, to me feels very special. So it's a great honor to be here with Rashesh. I don't have to really introduce him because you all know him, but in the course of our conversation, some of his story will come out. So Rashesh, do you want to just...
Thank you. Thank you.
The title of the session is Reflecting and Looking Forward in India and the Global Economy. But we'll try to make it as personal and authentic as possible, as opposed to theoretical. So let me maybe first, I'll take a minute to reflect. I came back to India 2 years ago after being away for 39 years. That's a long time, 39 years. So I left in 1978. Before that, I worked for 5 years. I started my career in the Tata Administrative Service, working actually with Mr. Ratan Tata. And I remember that in those days, it was the license Raj like nobody here will remember. I don't know how many folks here have worked the days of the license Raj, but it's like one hand. Anybody else who worked in the well, a handful. But to most people today I work with, that is history. Nobody even knows that. So when you wanted to start, say, a new production line, you had to go to the government in Delhi and go to the DGTD and the Department of Electronics and the Chief Controller of Imports and Exports and an alphabet soup of agencies to really get anything moving. That was the India that I had worked in. So it was really refreshing for me. Then I came back, then I was in the US. I came back on business starting around 2007. I began to have some engagements. And I could see this was a very, very different India that was emerging. I mean, a very different India. I can tell you the motivation by coming back 2 years ago. So as was mentioned, I served in the Obama administration. I had a very interesting global role. I was the president's lead official to promote US exports and investments into the US. So I had people in 78 countries, all the 50 states. And I traveled to about 40 countries. But I could see, looking at the opportunities, that the big areas of growth in the future would be number 1, India, number 2, ASEAN, and at that time I thought number 3, Sub-Saharan Africa. Now I'm a little bit less convinced about Sub-Saharan Africa, but India, there's no doubt in my mind that that was a good call, that it was the most important growth area for businesses. So when KPMG asked me, as the Obama administration was closing in December 2016, I said, I'd be happy to come. So I'm here, and I can tell you that everything I expected about the economy here has proven to be true. The opportunities I found are really immense. There are always pitfalls and issues, but in overall macro sense, when you compare to opportunities elsewhere in the globe, there's no doubt in my mind that India is the place to be. So that's I thought I would just set some context in terms of my reflection. But the real story here is Rashesh's story. So Rashesh just founded Edelweiss in 1996, literally about 4 or 5 years after the Indian economy began to open up. So at that time, what were your dreams?
I think, first of all, I want to thank all of you, Arun and Vani and everybody at Kalaari for this opportunity. This is truly a very exciting audience group out here to come and speak about India and, how we have experienced India, but how we're going to experience. So thanks a lot for that. Uh, it's always very easy to connect all the dots when in the past. So if you look at Indian economy, somewhere economic liberalization started, about 27, 28 years ago. And between 93 to 95, a lot of changes happened in the financial services industry. We started getting foreign investors coming into India, FIIs as they are called, started investing in Indian equity markets. We opened it up. We got the capital markets regulator. SEBI was formed in 1992. We got NSE came about in 1994. We got the private sector mutual funds. Until then, there was only UTI as a mutual fund. We got the private sector mutual funds also started in that time. We got private banks, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, they all came about at that time. So between 93 to 95, a lot of changes happened in the Indian financial services arena. I must admit that I don't think we really connected the dots and say, all this is happening and there is going to be a new era. But I think we could feel the excitement, we could feel that. And I used to work in ICICI. So we saw all that, and fortunately Vidya was still employed as a highly paid investment banker with a foreign investment bank. So there was a good source of income. So we thought we could take the risk, and we started Edelweiss at that time with an equity capital of 1 crore rupees, and there were two of us, I and my colleague who co-founded it with me, a guy called Venkat Ramaswamy, who is also still there. And over the years, I think from 2 people, we've gone to 12,000 people. From 1 crore rupees of equity capital, we are about 8,800 crores of equity capital. And this is in spite of making enormous amount of mistakes. So I do believe that all this happened because I think India is such a phenomenal growth story that as long as you can continue to make some affordable mistakes and all the stupid things that we have done over the last 22 years. So I think 3-4 things I would reflect back is, one is we don't realize it, I don't think we realized it then, but this is truly the golden age of compounding of India going on in real time. And since all of us are in investment business, we know the power of compounding. But just to give you a small example, when India got independence, our economy size was about $20 billion. In 2007, which is about 60 years after independence, the economy became $1 trillion. We added 1 trillion in the next 8 years. In 2015, India became a $2 trillion GDP, which means in spite of the global financial crisis, UPA 2, policy paralysis, and taper tantrum, all of that, and this is not purchasing power parity, this is an absolute number. India went from 1 trillion to 2 trillion. So what we added in the first 60 years, we added in 8 years. The third trillion we will add in 5 years. We're already about 2.5, 2.6. So we'll add 1 trillion in the next 5 years. Then we'll add 1 trillion in the next 3 years. And then we'll add another 1 trillion in the next 2 years. We'll become about 5 trillion by 2025. And after that, because even at 5 trillion, our per capita GDP will be about 3,500 to 4,000 US dollars, still very small. After that, we'll be adding $1 trillion. And again, remember, $1 trillion is India in 2007 as a whole. We will be adding $1 trillion every 18 months after that. So this is truly, we are very fortunate that all of us, are able to capitalize on this. But this is truly India's golden age of compounding. And I don't think there is any doubt that India will grow and its importance in the global economy will continue to grow. India today at 2.5 trillion, we are about 3% of the global GDP, but in most areas, including in financial services, our market share is only about 1%. So whether it's investment banking fees, whether it will be private equity investments, whether it's mortgages, whether it's assets under management, we are only 1% of the global market as of now. Though our economy is 3%, by 2025 we estimate that the global economy should be 100 trillion and India will be 5, so we should become 5 trillion. And we are hoping that our financial services industries will be 3% of global. So we are currently 1, will be 3% of the global market. And when we get to 3, 4, 5% of global markets is when India will truly start becoming interesting for a lot of global players. So we have the next 8, 10 years to keep it interesting for us because we have no other choice. We are in India. So I think the next 8, 10 years is a golden opportunity to try and build as much as you can build. So I think the growth is obvious, the opportunity obvious, but in India there always has to be a but. And what in the last 22 years, what I have learned, what we have, in Edelweiss experienced, is I always say that India, we are 22 years old as a company, but we are 88 quarters old as a company. Because in India, every quarter is a year by itself. So in India, we have this very strange, paradox, or what I call a very strange contrast, where the long-term story is actually very stable. And it's amazing how stable India is when you compare ourselves to other emerging markets. Our 25-year CAGR of the GDP real growth has been 7%. Our 20-year CAGR has also been 7%. Our 10-year CAGR has been 7%. Our 5-year CAGR is also 7%. So in spite of all government, UPA, NDA, coalition, we have grown at 7% for 25 years. Our exchange rate has depreciated an average of 3 to 4% a year over 25 years, which for an emerging market is not very unusual. Our inflation has been, the lowest has been 2%, highest has been 10%. We have 4 governments which completed 5 full years with 1 prime minister. We had Atal Bihari Vajpayee for 5 years, then UPA 1, UPA 2, and this government. So 20 years of political stability in some form or the other. So compared to any other emerging markets, we are very stable. But we don't appear stable. I mean, you ask anybody in this room, is India a stable country? The answer will be no. There is so much drama. Every quarter there is drama. There is a lot of what I call the Indian soap opera that goes on. So what we realize is India is a great country on a long-term basis when you see it from far away. But when you are there in real time, the volatility, the constant volatility that goes on is also very tiring. And this volatility is real. It's not artificial, it's not imaginary. It is real and you have to manage this. So in Edelweiss, we always say is how do you manage the volatility and play the trend? The worst thing to do in India is to try to play the volatility, that I want to sell at the bottom and buy at the top. You will get killed. So for all investors, idea is to, what we in Edelweiss also call a very bifocal approach. You need to have a bifocal approach of being able to see the long term, but also navigate the short term. And the short term is very treacherous. It is real, it is treacherous. And like we were talking earlier, the last quarter, NBFC, all the issues that went through, you have to navigate through all this. But if you keep both your eyes only on the short term, you will never be able to capitalize on the long-term opportunity. And if you look at only the long term, you will stumble somewhere and get caught up in this. So this is the larger problem in India. The opportunity is obvious, but in order to manage the short term in this, to capitalize on opportunity is real hard work, as I'm sure quite a few entrepreneurs and investors out here have experienced.
Yeah, and the drama is definitely exaggerated by the media.
Yeah, actually, India, there is a lot of, there is a chaos and the volatility. And I always say that in India, we have the normal market volatility, business volatility, from euphoria to pessimism. That happens everywhere in the world, overcapacity to undercapacity. So we have the normal, business cycle, which gets accentuated by what I call the the government and the regulatory intervention, because they are always pro-cyclical. So when a cycle is going down, they will make it worse. When it is going up, also they will make it worse. So we have the normal business cycle, then the government and the administrative interference, and then the media, which amplifies all the volatility into 20x of that. So India looks like a very chaotic country where there is constantly everything is very unbalanced. While if you look at any evidence of 20 years, it's not all that bad.
If I might just touch on another point. So when India became free in 1947, out of about 350 million people, about 250 million people were below the poverty line. Today with 1.3 billion, using the same poverty line, it's about 45 million below the poverty line. That's a dramatic improvement that people don't always think about. Now, of course, the poverty line needs to be raised as the country advances, but nevertheless, that is a very big improvement. The other thing that I find is the aspiration, the increasing middle class, and the aspiration of people at the middle class and the lower middle class. In fact, I think Vidya, the stories that you portrayed, those are just things that are so exciting. There's that energy in India that will drive the country.
I think this is truly the golden age of India. And as I said, I mean, even though we are at a 2.5, 2.6 now, almost the sixth biggest economy in the world in absolute terms. I think in purchasing power, we are already third biggest in the world. But in absolute also, we are already the sixth biggest in the world. But the problem in India is, though the economy is large, the scale is there. You ask any entrepreneur, making this scale work for you to create value is very, very hard. Because in spite of us being a large economy with all this aspiration and optimism, India is still a very tough country to do business in, because there are a lot of the frictional cost and the challenges and the bureaucracy and all. But coupled with that, our unit economics are still very low, because we are still a $2,000 per capita country. So how do you capitalize on this large scale that we have with very low unit economics is where the biggest entrepreneurial challenge is, the business challenges that happen. An average mutual fund investment is about 1,000 rupees. An average insurance policy is about 8,000 rupees. 8,000 rupees to have an insurance advisor who will advise, good quality advice, handhold the client, collect documentation, those 18 forms to be filled up and the signatures and all, is where the unit economics break down. And that's why you will see in India that profitability has become more and more challenging. But the good news on that is, as the scale is going up, along with technology and other interventions, even the break-even cost for unit economics is coming down. So as you extrapolate 5 years, 10 years down the line, and I'm hoping that the government intervention and the bureaucracy also comes down, then you will really see the real golden age of India, because the market is obvious. I don't think in India the demand side is a problem on any good idea. The biggest problem, things break down on the supply side, and the supply side is how to make unit economics work, how to really manage the bureaucracy and the red tape and all that, because that really are the stumbling blocks. Everything you see per capita is so low that everything has to go up. Insurance, mutual funds, or any other industry, consumer, retail. India is a lot of innovation in India. A lot of the thinking that needs to go is how to make this supply side work, given all these particular challenges of India.
So I don't know if I didn't mention that Rashesh had been the chairman of FICCI, which is a huge commitment of time for the general good. And so Rashesh, in that capacity, you had some work on, you looked at financial inclusion. And would you like to share your thoughts on financial inclusion?
Yeah, actually, I think first of all, the FICCI tenure is over, so I'm a lot more relaxed. It was for a year, the calendar year 2018, but it was very amazing, and it was a very eye-opening experience for me, because we are so caught up in our in the Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore cocoon. For the first time, I realized that and I asked this in Edelweiss and asked this as the pop quiz to a lot of people, that how much do you think is the SC and ST, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes population in India? And I find that most of us don't get it because I didn't know this a year ago. The SC/ST population in India is about 25% of our population is in that SC/ST category. There is another 40% of the population in the OBC category, which is other backward caste. So we have about 65% of our people still in that category who are trapped out there. And whatever we say, what we see in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, all these places, it's still a very small slice. And if this is great opportunity that is available in India, how do you make sure that at least it starts to percolate down as fast as possible? And there are a lot of challenges on that. People talk about universal basic income, all of that. I was very fortunate. I got involved in quite a few government think tanks on all these issues. But for me, it was a big eye opener that there is a large part of population which is not actually, they are getting some benefit, but I think all of us have been disproportionate beneficiaries of what India has offered in the last 25, 30 years, and we have to somewhere equalize this. And what I saw in the last year is unless in a democracy we can get the wealth creation engine and the wealth transfer engine, both the engines, unless they are fixed, because any democracy works when you have wealth creation and wealth transfer working in sync with each other. As I said, the US has also been very good at wealth creation, but the wealth transfer has not really worked as well. But when you look at some Scandinavian countries, or when you look at Germany and Canada also, the wealth creation, wealth transfer have worked a lot more in sync. In India, I think our wealth creation engine is struggling and our wealth transfer is struggling. When we meet in forums like this, we always talk about the wealth creation engine. We will have our issues with angel tax, and we'll have our issues, and they're all real. I think we need to get the wealth creation engine started, but all of us should remember that wealth creation should not be the end game. We have to also add the wealth transfer engine along with that, and whether it's UBI or whether it's government subsidies or agri loan waiver, or even taxation system is a wealth transfer engine in some form or the other. There are some very efficient forms of the wealth transfer, some are very inefficient, like maybe agri loan waiver and all. But in this kind of groups also, we need to start talking about how to do both wealth creation and wealth transfer. And I think after being involved for 1 year in actually understanding the real issues of India on the margin, because I think the issues are so big and complex, but I got a chance to see it from the margin, and I think it was very eye-opening that there is a lot of things that need to be solved. Corporate India is doing, I think, whether we call it CSR or philanthropy or all the other things, we need to do a lot more, but we need to talk about it a lot more.
In fact, in Davos this year, Paul Polman, I don't know whether you listened to him, the head of Unilever, he made a very special point of saying that companies are really not today, the only stakeholders are not the shareholders. You have to have society, you have to address issues of inequality, and in a way start just with your own communities. And Satya Nadella made a point of saying that Microsoft was going to provide $500 million for low-cost housing in Seattle, the community that they live. So that whole thinking that it's not just about wealth creation, but also the wealth transfer.
I think it was 80s and all, maybe 30, 40 years ago, when we said, greed is good and Wall Street and Dalal Street and all, is when we had shareholder capitalism. I think we have to move to 21st century, which is maybe called stakeholder capitalism. We need to move away from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism. And I hope that in India, India will grow. I don't think there is any doubt that we'll become 5 trillion, 10 trillion by 2034, give or take a year. But the quality of our growth is going to be very important, because it could be very chaotic and unhappy growth, or it can be a lot more happier and more balanced growth also. And I think unless we start thinking about all these issues also, as we think about growth and the opportunities in growth and the wealth creation and the value creation and all that, we have to do both in sync, because India's growth is a given. I don't think, because our current demographics, and it's a very simple math you can do. We have about 28-30% savings rate. Our investment rate is about 33-34%. We have what is called incremental capital output ratio, as the economists call it, of around 4.5. So when you do the math on that, a 6 to 8% growth in India is there. And for the last 25 years, which is 100 quarters, if you look at it, for almost 85 out of the 100 quarters, our GDP growth rate has been between 6 to 8% annualized. So I think India's growth in this range is not very hard to do, given where we are. But the quality of the growth is going to be a huge open-ended equation for us, and how we manage it, what we can do, and and it's not just us, it's the government and everybody else. But I think understanding the realities of India will give us some clues in terms of how do we handle this.
So I think that brings us to the end of our time, as I can see. So Rashesh, thank you very much. And I think,
Thanks a lot.